On Thanksgiving Day 1995, Jim Carrey reached into his wallet and pulled out a check he had written to himself years earlier. $10 million. Dated that exact day. For acting services rendered. He had carried it through every audition, every rejection. Every night, he drove up Mulholland Drive with nothing but a belief the world had not yet agreed with. And on the day that check was dated, he learned he had just been offered $10 million for Dumb and Dumber. The number on the check and the number on the offer were identical. But what almost nobody knows, what the Hollywood version of this story always skips, is where Jim Carrey was before any of this. He was 15 years old, working a factory job, living in a Volkswagen van with his family parked on a relative's lawn. This is that story. Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button so you never miss what we uncover next on The Silent Fortunes. His name was Jim Carrey. And before we go any further into what he built, let us be honest about where he started. Not the Canadian kid with natural talent who made it to Hollywood. The 15-year-old boy who walked off a school campus for the last time and walked into a factory because his family needed the money and he was old enough to provide it. So here are the two questions at the center of this story. What does that kind of weight actually do to a person, a boy carrying a man's responsibility before he is finished growing up? And what did Jim Carrey do in the silence of those years, in the factory, in the van, in the rooms where nobody was watching, that the world would eventually pay $10 million to see? Jim Carrey was born on January 17, 1962 in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada, the son of Percy Carrey, an accountant by profession and an amateur musician by passion, a man who gave his son both a love of making people laugh and an early education in what financial instability actually felt like from the inside. The family was working class in the truest sense. Money was always careful, never abundant. But the household was stable and Jim's talent was visible from the time he was old enough to perform for anyone who would watch. He was doing impressions before most kids his age had figured out what they were good at. His teachers noticed. His family noticed. The talent was real and it was obvious. Then Percy lost his accounting job. Jim was around 12 years old. And what happened next did not happen slowly. It happened all at once, the way financial collapse almost always does. The family lost their home and moved into a Volkswagen van parked on a relative's lawn in Scarborough, Ontario. Jim Carrey was a teenager living in a van, watching his father, a man who had worked his entire adult life, sit with the specific, quiet devastation of a man who can no longer provide. At 15, Jim dropped out of school and took a factory job, not because he had given up, because someone had to. Every night after his shift, he was still writing jokes, still practicing, still carrying something the factory floor was working very hard to take from him. Think about what that life actually looked like. A 15-year-old boy waking up before dawn, going to a factory, working a full shift, coming home to a Volkswagen van parked on someone else's lawn, watching his father, a man who had done everything right, sit with the specific silent shame of a man the world had decided it no longer needed. Jim Carrey carried all of that, every single day, without putting it down. And then he walked onto the stage at Yuk Yuk's comedy club in Toronto, and the audience did not laugh. He was not politely ignored. He bombed. Completely. The one place he had believed his talent would finally speak for itself had just told him, in the most public and humiliating way possible, that maybe he had been wrong about what he had. A teenage boy, factory job, van, failed performance, and a dream that nothing around him was confirming was real. And just when it seemed like there was no way out, something shifted. Jim Carrey made a decision that most people in his position never make. He decided the factory was not the ceiling. It was a chapter. He moved to Los Angeles in his late teens with almost nothing, no connections, no credits, no obvious reason for the industry to pay attention to him, but with a conviction so specific and so unshakable that it functioned less like hope and more like a plan. And then he did something that most people would call naive, and that history has since confirmed was one of the most psychologically sophisticated things any person in his position has ever done. He wrote himself a check for $10 million, dated Thanksgiving 1995, for acting services rendered, and put it in his wallet. Not as fantasy, as a daily reminder of the direction he had chosen when nothing around him agreed with the choice. He stopped measuring his life against where he was. He started measuring it against where he had decided he was going. That single shift, from present circumstances to chosen destination, is the decision that separated Jim Carrey from everyone else who started where he started. The years in Los Angeles were not fast. They were small roles that went nowhere, comedy club sets that sometimes worked and sometimes did not, and the specific grinding patience of a man who had already decided where he was going and was simply waiting for the world to agree. In 1990, In Living Color gave Jim Carrey the first platform large enough to show what he was actually capable of. The industry finally had something to point at. And then 1994 happened. Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, The Mask, Dumb and Dumber. 3 films in 1 year that made Jim Carrey the highest-paid comedian in Hollywood history. The factory worker from Scarborough, Ontario, had become the man studios were writing 8-figure checks to. And on Thanksgiving 1995, he reached into his wallet and pulled out the check he had written to himself years earlier. $10 million. Dated that exact day, the world had finally caught up. Today, Jim Carrey's net worth is estimated at approximately $180 million. Built from a factory floor. Built from a Volkswagen van parked on a relative's lawn in Scarborough, Ontario. Built from a bombed performance at Yuk Yuk's and years of Los Angeles rejection that most people would have read as a final answer. So what do we take from his story? 2 silent fortunes. The first is this: the weight you carry for the people you love does not have to crush the dream. The responsibility and the dream can exist at the same time. Jim Carrey proved it at 15 years old. And the second, write the check before the world agrees with you. Jim Carrey's $10 million check was not delusion. It was discipline. The decision to believe before the evidence arrives is the only decision that ever produces the evidence. The boy who worked a factory shift at 15 to keep his family alive pulled a $10 million check out of his wallet on Thanksgiving 1995 and learned the world had finally caught up with what he had always known about himself. So here is the question I want to leave you with today. Jim Carrey wrote himself a $10 million check when he had absolutely nothing. What would you write on yours right now? And do you actually believe it? Tell me in the comments below. Subscribe to The Silent Fortunes. Every week, another story the world forgot to tell.